The 1990s was the peak golden age of hip-hop music. Don't get it twisted. Each rap decade since the 80s has been special in its own way, and I'm certainly not one of those hip-hop heads arguing that things were better back in the day. But if you're talking the greatest decade for hip-hop music, it's really hard to look past the 90s. Just have a think about all the incredible rappers that debuted. So let's get into it. Rass Kass may not be mentioned in the same breath as other 90s West Coast greats like Ice Cube or Snoop Dogg, but that's never been a problem for the super lyrical talent hailing from Carson, California. Founded by EIHT in 1989, Sick Wid It Records was a pioneer rap label for the independent movement, inspiring both future moguls like Master P and Birdman. If there was ever a rapper who has come to represent the excess commercialism, watered-down samples, and nostalgia of late 90s bad boy era in the public's mind, it's Mase. At the beginning the 1990s, Bun B and Pimp C were two up-and-coming rappers from Port Arthur, Texas, who had just released their debut album, Too Hard to Swallow, which had barely made a dent on the charts. If you're a West Coast hip-hop head, then it shouldn't have been a surprise to you when you heard EIHT make his entrance on the second half of Kendrick Lamar's Mad City. The Compton rapper is the very definition of an original gangsta. Eminem would provide Dre with the energy and inspiration he needed to transform Aftermath Entertainment into a juggernaut, and in return, the Compton legend would give him a platform to become the biggest rapper of all time. While it was in the 2000s that Eminem would make his most significant impact on hip-hop, his output during the 1990s was enough to warrant his placement on this list. During the 1990s, as the Wu-Tang Clan were making their way up the music industry, Reese's Staten Island home studio got hit by two flood, destroying over 500 beats meant for Method Man, Raekwon, GZA, Ghostface, and Inspectah Deck. While the other members were able to recreate their albums, Deck's debut was delayed for years, and the final product was very different from what was destroyed in the floods. I'll never forget the way rap legend Kool G described Pharoahe Monch's lyrical skills in his book, There's a God on the Mic, writing, Pharoahe Monch is like an eloquent linguistics professor moonlighting as a rhyme serial killer terrorist, challenging the listener's IQ, while daring him or her to keep up. When Nas was on his murderous feature run during the mid-1990s, destroying every guest verse he could get his hands on, his partner in rhyme was one of the few rappers who managed to keep up with him every step of the way, which is quite a feat in itself. At the end of Can It Be All So Simple on Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, the Wu begin discussing the members and their various roles. When it comes to GZA, Raekwon explains, the G is just the genius, he's the backbone of the whole shit. To watch Common's evolution from a Chicago b-boy to one of the leading figures of the conscious rap movement was a fascinating sight. To understand the true brilliance of the Roots lead MC, you need to immerse yourself in the group's second album. Sure, Illadelph Half-Life had more success and Things Fall Apart won them a Grammy. Gang Starr's work during the 1990s was enough to cement their position as one of the greatest rap duos of all time. From the incredibly raw, but promising no more Mr. Nice Guy to their magnum opus Moment of Truth, Busta Rhymes came into the rap game as part of four-man group, Leaders of the New School, alongside Charlie Brown, Cut Monitor Milo, and Dinko D, but it was clear from the outset that they're one member who was emerging as a clear superstar. A Philly-born and raised MC who moved to the West Coast when he was 16 years old. How could Kurupt not become one of the dopest ever? Whether it was destroying tracks like Stranded on Death Row over Dr. Dre's funky production, Mos Def, along with fellow Raucous Records rappers Talib Kweli and Company Fellow, came to define the underground hip-hop scene of the late 90s. The Brooklyn rapper only dropped 2 albums during the decade, rap group into a household name, but aside from the pop hits, Naughty by Nature, and more particularly, Treach, contributed to perfecting the rap album Blueprint. The rise and fall of A Tribe Called Quest, and the subsequent of Q-Tip's solo career, all happened within the span of the 1990s. That's how busy the Tribe frontman was during the decade. DMX made his official debut at the beginning of 1998, but truthfully, He had been grinding away at his music for years before that. His first single, Born Loser, dropped in 1993. But when X finally hit the rap game, it was like a tidal wave of black hoodies and Timberland rocking stick-up artists kicking down the door to the bad boy mansion. The Corona, Queen's legend, is a product of the 1980s, coming up with the likes of rap gods like Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, and KRS-One, but his best work was created in the 1990s. Big L was one of the biggest what-ifs in hip-hop. Hip-hop heads dream of scenarios where the Harlem rapper wasn't gunned down in his prime and lived to sign with Roc-A-Fella Records to drop more lyrical wizardry. As dope as his appearances were on Wu-Tang's debut album, it was on Raekwon's only built for Cuban links that Ghostface had his coming out party, billed as Chef Raekwon Guest, starring Tony Starks. When it comes to pure technical skills, there were very few rappers in the 1990s who could touch Big Pun's prowess on the mic. I mean, every rap fan worth their weight can recite Pun's famous lines off Twins Deep Cover 98. By the start of the 1990s, LL Cool J was a certified veteran in the rap game, 5 years removed since the release of Radio, which also happened to be Def Jam's first full-length rap release. The Queen's MC was no longer the 16-year-old b-boy making his debut. Chris may have changed the game as part of Boogie Down Productions in the 1980s. But in my opinion, the Blastmaster had an even better run in the next decade. After dropping the last two ever Boogie Down albums, Adoutement and Sex and Violence, Cars embarked on his solo career in 1993. A hugely talented MC on his own, Big Boy could damn near outspit 95% of all the rappers who came out in the 1990s. It just so happened that he was paired with quite possibly the most original and brilliant hip-hop artist ever, so he was always a little underrated. With his signature husky voice, indecipherable slang, and mafioso crime tales, Raekwon the Chef, since debuting with the Wu in 1993, there wasn't a year that decade that Chef Raekwon didn't stand out to represent for the New York rap scene. Hip-hop heads talk about Busta Rhymes being the feature's MVP of the 90s, but honestly, think Method Man dropped hotter guest verses. The only thing holding Meth back from being higher on this list was his solo out his debut album. Rakim had already changed the entire rap landscape in the latter half of the 1980s, when he dropped the genre-defining Paid in Full, and the equally impressive, if not better, Follow the Leader, but he wasn't satisfied with that. Prodigy positioned himself as one of the best rappers of the 1990s with his killer quotables, icy flow, and dead-eyed delivery. Blessed with an undeniable voice, Prodigy has probably ended up being one of the most sampled rappers of all time. Lauryn Hill only dropped 3 albums, including one solo project, during the 1990s, but she made a bigger impact than 99% of the rappers on this list. Jay-Z emerged in the 1990s as the underdog, an underground Brooklyn MC who has the taste for the finer things in life, and could articulate it immaculately. Within 3 years of his debut, he had transformed from the independent hustler to the king of rap. Blessed with an ice-cold flow and confident swagger, Jay's biggest success during the 1990s came from his ability to marry relatable street content with the glossy commercial sound required to dominate the charts. André 3000 evolution from Outkast's debut album to their last release in the 1990s, Aquemini, would provide the blueprint for later greats like Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar, rappers who weren't content to settle for just one particular sound or look, like the skit on their second album, but through his transformation over the decade, Stax never lost a step in his rhyming ability. There wasn't a rapper alive in the 1990s who was as ridiculously consistent as Reggie Noble. The funky New Jersey MC stayed putting out flamers the entire decade. Every verse that REDMAN spit was incredibly memorable. Reggie had one of the best 3 album runs of the decade with his first 3 projects. And if you pair that with all the dope features he also dropped in the 1990s, there's no doubt that he was one of the best. One of the most important pioneer rappers to come out of the South, Scarface was a busy artist during the 1990s. Coming into the decade as part of the infamous Ghetto Boys, Scarface was responsible for the group's biggest hit and best rap song of 1991, when he penned "Mind Playing Tricks on Me." As a solo artist, Face found even greater success as he perfected his world-weary storytelling rap style. Snoop's debut Doggy Style sold over 800,000 copies in its first week, which was the record for a debuting artist and the fastest-selling hip-hop album ever at the time. Snoop was the West Coast version of Slick Rick rapping over the funkiest production in rap history. How could he not be the biggest thing in the world? It's actually so ridiculous when you think about it. Between 1990 and 1992, Ice Cube really managed to drop 3 certified classic albums: America's Most Wanted, Death Certificate, and The Predator, and a classic EP. Kill at Will was also the first rap EP to go platinum. It really is the greatest run by a rapper of all time. When an 18-year-old Nas first showed up on Main Sources, live at the barbecue, talking about going to hell for snuffing Jesus and kidnapping the president's wife without a plan, no one could have foreseen the heights that he would reach in the coming years. Of course, he displayed a talent with words far beyond his age and a technical rap ability that suggested he poured over the records of Rakim, Kool G Rap, and Big Daddy Kane. But to say that rap fans expected something as great, as thought-provoking and deep as Illmatic a few years after Live at the Barbecue would just be insanity. Biggie's debut album was a monumental release of New York hip-hop and positioned him as a future great. With Puff Daddy as his executive producer, the Bed Stewie showcased his cinematic storytelling and pinpoint delivery over West Coast-inspired production. But Ready to Die wasn't Biggie's magnum opus. That may sound like blasphemy, but it's the truth. Big's debut wasn't even the best rap album of 1994. That honor goes to Illmatic, as we've already established earlier. It was actually on his second album, Life After Death. You know what the craziest thing about Tupac's rap career? His debut album, Tupac Ellipse Now, dropped November 12, 1991. In his first posthumous release, The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, which came out on November 5, 1996, were almost exactly 5 years apart. Within those 5 years, Pac accomplished more than what most rappers could have hoped to achieve over the course of their entire career. Thank you guys so much for watching this entire countdown. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to drop your top 5 rappers in the comments below. Let me know if I missed out on anyone too. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Peace.